Hi, I'm Bonnie Mincu, Senior Certified ADHD Coach and founder of Thrive with ADD. You're listening to ADHD Self-Mastery. The first step towards achieving mastery over frustrating traits or tendencies is to be able to know what you're trying to master. That means recognizing the nature of the challenge or problem, because if you don't identify the problem correctly, you're going to waste time chasing the wrong solution. Here's a brief ADHD style digression as an example. Years ago, I decided to learn how to craft sculptures involving wood. I bought a small Dremel at the hardware store, but I felt intimidating about using it. And I figured I'd gain confidence in a class where I could learn how to work with wood. So I signed up for Carpentry 101. I showed up the first day to find a bunch of big strapping guys and scary looking power tools. Carpentry 101 was a class geared to carpenters and people in the building trade. What I wanted to learn was woodworking with small hand tools, not to build a house. I'm proud to say I stuck it out and built my own stool and sawhorse thanks to a lot of muscle help from classmates, but I never did learn to use my Dremel. The point is, words matter when it comes to finding the right solution. And these days, the word overwhelm is being vastly overused to refer to any kind of mental paralysis. Overwhelm means too much. In the last 3 episodes, I talked about causes and solutions for overwhelm, common to people with ADHD. There are ways we bring on too much and are then justifiably overwhelmed with too much to do. But there's a tendency for ADHD brains to put up false signals of overwhelm as well. Your brain might be triggered when you try to work in the wrong modality, or you might hold assumptions that cause the perception of too much to handle when there are easier or more efficient ways to get things done. This episode is about a sense of overwhelm related to ambiguity. Ambiguity refers to anything that's unknown or unclear, and is a term often used when more than one meaning could be interpreted. My coaching client, Eric, tended to constantly describe himself as overwhelmed because his boss's unclear direction left him in a state of tension. Once Eric was assigned a lengthy report to write that was due the following Friday. On Wednesday, his boss asked about progress and wanted to go over the report that afternoon. Eric was still in the research phase and had nothing to show. And when he asked about the deadline being Friday, his boss said, well, he assumed the rough draft would have been written by now. After a few similar misunderstandings of the boss's expectations, Eric made a point of asking exactly what would be expected at each stage of a project rather than simply knowing the final deadline. When someone has power over your career, their expectations matter. If they don't communicate clearly what they want, you can find yourself playing a guessing game, hoping to provide what you think they want. You're expanding double the effort. Before you can do the work, you have to try to figure out what the work is, or possibly provide for different contingencies. That kind of ambiguity can bring about a feeling of helplessness that for some people is absolutely paralyzing. Remember, when you're mentally paralyzed by anything you don't know, you're feeling helpless, not overwhelmed. Helplessness and overwhelm are easily confused because it's so easy for one of those feelings to trigger the other. But if you want solutions for breaking through the impasse, you need to know which came first and what was the root cause of the problem. Using the metaphor of your brain as a bus with different characters aboard who might start driving, the 2 characters who often sit together on the bus are the ones I call overwhelmed Oscar and helpless Hannah. Helpless Hannah shuts down when there's anything she doesn't know. When she takes the wheel, the bus stalls and doesn't move forward. For my client, Eric, his constant state of tension dealing with his boss stemmed from a feeling of helplessness, never knowing what the boss really wanted. When he thought he was doing what was right, and then got a sudden curveball that made him scramble to provide more in a hurry, he did feel overwhelmed. But the root cause of the problem was helplessness. Here's how you get to the root cause of a problem like this. Ask yourself why several times. Why did you feel overwhelmed this week? I had to suddenly write a report I was told wasn't due for 2 more days. Why did you suddenly have to provide the report early? I didn't realize the boss expected to see a rough draft before the final report. Why didn't you realize that? I don't have ESP. He never communicated that part. That happens a lot with him, where he doesn't tell me what he wants and then acts like I should have known. What would help in the future? Explaining to him that I need to know more explicitly what he expects at each stage of a project. The solution for Eric's problem would have to lie in clearing up ambiguity as best he could so he could stop feeling so helpless. Eric was able to assertively ask his boss for more direction, but other clients I've had would have been reluctant to do that because, well, they had different characters driving their brain. We'll get more into the ways helpless Hannah drives after a quick break.
Do your ADHD tendencies get in the way of you doing what you intend to? Traditional strategies for getting things done may not work for you. You need solutions tailored for your unique brain. In Bonnie Mincu's training membership program, Productivity Pathfinder, learn ADHD self-mastery step-by-step at your own pace in a supportive community with live online options each week. Learn more about Productivity Pathfinder at thrivewithadd.com.
Welcome back to ADHD Self-Mastery. I'm Bonnie Mincu, and we've been talking about how the word overwhelm is often mistakenly used to describe situations of ambiguity, where there's something you don't know, and the real feeling when you're stuck in ambiguity is helplessness. Here are some typical I don't know kinds of triggers that can paralyze you. When you don't know what to do, you don't know the goal or purpose of an assignment, you don't know where to start a project, you don't know where to find what you need, you don't know how to decide or prioritize, you don't know how to create a plan. That helpless feeling can quickly turn into overwhelm, and then instead of moving forward, you stay stuck, and you may even blame yourself for procrastinating. But the problem with identifying your mental paralysis as overwhelm is it doesn't get you towards the solution you need, because overwhelm means feeling like too much. What would a solution be for something that seems like too much? Well, it would involve making the amount smaller, looking into how you could do less, or breaking a large project down into small manageable chunks. That's probably not going to be a helpful solution for these I don't know situations. What would be better? We'd need to look at different types of ambiguity related challenges one at a time. Ambiguity centers on an unknown factor where you have questions. You need answers to clear up what you don't know. When you don't know what to do, usually you need to get an answer from a person or from another source of information, these days often found online. So instead of remaining helpless and paralyzed, take the action of writing down clearly what your question is and deciding your first step in getting an answer. If you ask in a search engine like Google, be patient. It can be overwhelming when you're provided with too much information. To narrow down the answers, be as specific as possible with your question. For example, you might provide the make and model and year if you're asking any question to do with technology or equipment. If you're looking for answers online, have somewhere where you'll save the snippets of useful information that you encounter. For example, I had to try to find an answer recently in the IRS tax website. Talk about overwhelming. I opened a fresh page in Evernote where I could copy and paste information pieces that I found that seemed like they would give me the answer. What if you have a project to do and you don't know where to start? Don't let the steps of the project swirl around in your head. Write them down along with action steps you can think of. Then the mind map would help. Then imagine yourself doing a step that seems like it would be one of the first steps. If you realize that something else needs to be done first, imagine yourself doing that step and keep moving back in your visualizing until you've reached a step that can be done right away. And that's where you can start. Once you've reached that starting decision, be intentional about when you'll take action and begin that step, and be clear about what the doing involves. And as you're writing out the steps of the project, think about any unknown, unclear, or ambiguous things in the project, anything you're uncertain about. List those questions and get answers early on, so you don't have to pull up short once you get into a role on the project. On the topic of projects, one source of overwhelm for a lot of people is having to provide a plan or a timetable for getting the project done. I've had many ADHD coaching clients who feel dread at the question, when do you think you'll have this done? When asked by their boss or a colleague. Why the overwhelm or dread? Well, because they didn't know when it would be done. They didn't know how to determine how long the project would take and didn't know how to produce a plan or a timetable. They were confident in their ability to do the work, but not in being able to plan it or time box it. So they were really feeling helpless and nervous about how to respond. If you can relate to a situation like that, you don't need a solution for overwhelm. What you need is to learn how to plan a project. And a similar kind of situation comes up for when you might feel overwhelmed at having to make a decision or prioritize. The solution here is to learn a good process for decision making or prioritizing. And once you have that, you can do it confidently and you won't be paralyzed. Well, I've spent several podcast episodes on this topic of overwhelm, and I hope conveying that the biggest problem with ADHD and overwhelm is that people are usually saying they're overwhelmed instead of identifying the real problem. So next time you're feeling overwhelmed, the moment you feel it, stop and ask yourself, what triggered that feeling? If it had to do with too much, then yes, you're overwhelmed. But if your mental paralysis comes from anything containing the words, I don't know in the sentence, then it's more likely helpless frustration that you're feeling. And how do you pull out of being helpless? By learning the answer to whatever it is you don't know. The solutions you need may lie in getting information and answers. It may require learning a process or a skill or a different approach to organizing. All the solutions are there for you and for anyone with ADHD. The challenge is in applying the right solution, the right strategies that will really work for you. And it starts with correctly identifying the problem. My affordable Productivity Pathfinder monthly membership program starts out by helping you do that and provides training, coaching, and support in your journey to ADHD self-mastery. You can read about it and join at productivitypathfinder.com. This is Bonnie Mincu of Thrive with ADD. Please subscribe to this podcast, ADHD Self-Mastery, for more customized solutions for your unique brain.
Learn more about Bonnie and her Productivity Pathfinder training program for ADHD adults at thrivewithadd.com.